The sodium-sharp smell of cheap instant noodles filled the air, mixing with the faint must of old carpet that never quite dried after last week's rain. Lin May's fingers cramped around the chopsticks, the wooden splinters catching against her calluses as steam rose into her face. Outside, the city buses groaned past the narrow window of the fourth-floor walk-up, their brakes shrieking like wounded birds. She lifted the noodles to her mouth, and the taste hit her tongue. Artificial beef flavoring. That metallic edge that came from packaging that sat too long in warehouse fluorescent lights. The broth burned the roof of her mouth. And then the world tilted. Not the room. The world. Lin May's chopsticks clattered against the edge of the ceramic bowl, the one with the chip on the rim. The one she'd bought at the street market for 30 yuan because it was all she could afford. Her breath caught. That bowl. She knew that bowl. She'd thrown that bowl away 7 years ago, after she'd finally saved enough to move to a better apartment, the one with actual heating and windows that didn't rattle in the wind. 7 years ago. Her hand trembled as she set the bowl down on the kotatsu table, its surface scarred with old coffee rings, the table she'd gotten from the second-hand store on Nanshan Road, the table she'd sold when Chen Wei convinced her they needed to invest in quality furniture for the home they'd build together. The rain hammered harder against the window, and Lin May's eyes traveled slowly across the room. The futon mattress in the corner, still on the floor because she hadn't been able to afford a bed frame. The stack of business textbooks from the university library, their due dates stamped in purple ink on the inside covers. The calendar on the wall with the cute, illustrated cats, marking off days in March 2015. 2015. The noodles had gone cold in the bowl, a thin film of oil congealing on the surface. Lin May stared at it, her pulse thundering in her ears loud enough to drown out the rain. She was 32 years old. She had died at 37, in a hospital bed that smelled of antiseptic and defeat, with medical bills scattered across the sheets like accusatory ghosts. She had died alone, with nothing, after Chen Wei had drained her savings account, maxed out the credit cards she'd stupidly put in both their names, and disappeared with his business partner, the woman he'd introduced as just a colleague for 3 years. But she was 27 now. She could feel it in her bones, in the tightness of her skin, in the way her knees didn't ache when she stood. She pressed her palm flat against the kotatsu table, feeling the cheap wood grain beneath her fingers. 27. 5 years before Chen Wei would convince her to trust him. 4 years before she'd hand over her life savings, the money she'd scraped together from tutoring students after her day job at the accounting firm, the money she'd saved by eating instant noodles 6 nights a week, the money she'd put aside coin by coin for her dream, her future, the business. Her business? The idea she'd shared with him over cheap baijiu in a restaurant booth, sketching it out on a napkin with such excitement she'd spilled soy sauce on her sleeve. The consulting firm specializing in helping small manufacturers navigate the new digital marketplace, e-commerce platforms, supply chain optimization, international shipping logistics. She'd seen the gap in the market, understood it in her bones from her years working in accounting, watching small business owners struggle with the transition to online sales. And Chen Wei had listened with those warm brown eyes, nodding in all the right places, asking intelligent questions. He'd made her feel heard. Understood. He'd told her it was brilliant. He'd told her she was brilliant. Then he'd taken the entire business plan, the client contacts she'd carefully cultivated, every single yuan she'd saved, and started the company himself, with his partner, Liu Xiao, without Lin May's name anywhere on the registration documents. The memory burned like the noodle broth had burned her mouth, sharp and immediate and real. Lin May stood up so fast the kotatsu table rocked, sloshing cold noodle broth over the rim of the bowl. Her legs felt strange, younger, stronger than they had in years. She crossed to the narrow window in 3 strides and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Below, the street market was packing up for the evening, vendors covering their produce with blue tarps against the rain. The tea house on the corner had its red lanterns lit, the same tea house that would close down in 2 years when the owners retired. But right now, in this moment, everything was still there. Still whole. Still before. She hadn't met Chen Wei yet. That would happen in 3 months at her cousin's wedding reception. She'd spill red wine on his shirt, and he'd laugh it off, charming and easy, and ask for her number, so you can pay for the dry cleaning. She'd thought it was adorable. She'd thought he was different from the men who only wanted her to cook and clean and produce grandchildren. She'd been so catastrophically wrong. Lin Mei pulled back from the window, leaving a ghost of condensation on the glass from her breath. Her reflection stared back at her. 27 years old, with clear eyes and unwrinkled skin, wearing the cheap cotton pajamas she'd bought on sale at the department store. She looked so young, so unbroken. The instant noodles had left a greasy feeling in her mouth. She went to the tiny kitchenette, barely more than a hot plate and a min fridge tucked into a corner, and filled a glass with tap water. The pipes groaned and shuddered before releasing a stream of lukewarm water that tasted faintly of rust. She drank it anyway, feeling it wash away the sodium coating on her tongue. In the other timeline, the first timeline, the real timeline, she'd spend the next 3 months working herself to exhaustion. 60-hour weeks at the accounting firm, tutoring high school students on weekends, saving every spare yuan, building her dreams one late night at a time. Then Chenwei would walk into her life like a summer storm, all charisma and grand plans. He'd court her with street food and walks along the river, cheap dates that felt romantic instead of economical. He'd talk about the future like it was a country they'd explore together, and slowly, so slowly she barely noticed, he'd start asking about her dreams, her plans, her business idea. "You're so smart," he'd say, tracing circles on her palm with his thumb. "You see opportunities other people miss." And she'd glowed under that attention like a plant finally getting sunlight. By the time he asked to borrow money to invest in their future together, she was already planning wedding venues in her head. By the time she handed over the account information, she'd already mentally named their future children. She'd been such a fool. Lin Mei set the water glass down with enough force that it cracked, a small split running up one side. She stared at it, at this tiny act of destruction, and felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. Not this time. This time, she knew exactly what Chenwei would do. She knew his business plan because it had been her business plan. She knew which clients he'd target first, which partnerships he'd forge, which mistakes he'd make in the early days before Lu Xiaoxiao's family connections bailed him out. She knew everything, and she was going to take it all. The rain had softened to a steady patter against the window. Lin Mei moved through the tiny apartment, her movements purposeful now. She pulled out the stack of business textbooks, the notebooks where she'd already started sketching out ideas. In the back of her closet, buried under winter coats, she found the folder, dog-eared and precious, where she kept her real treasures. Bank statements showing her savings account balance, contact information for potential clients she'd been too nervous to approach, articles she'd printed from the library's computer about e-commerce platforms and supply chain management. She spread them out on the kotatsu table, up pushing aside the bowl of cold noodles. Her savings account had 43,000 yuan in it. Not much, but it was hers, completely hers, earned through her own sweat and sacrifice. In the first timeline, she'd eventually save up to 180,000 yuan before handing it all over to Chenwei. This time, she'd use every yuan to destroy him instead. Lin Mei pulled out her phone, an old smartphone with a cracked screen protector, and opened her notes app. Her fingers flew across the screen as she began to write, downloading 5 years of future knowledge into concrete action steps. Step 1. Register the company immediately. Name. Something different enough that it won't seem like copying when Chenwei inevitably starts his own. Maybe New Path Consulting instead of Digital Bridge Solutions. Step 2. Secure the key clients. She knew which small manufacturers were struggling with the transition to e-commerce. She knew because Chenwei had told her about them, bragging about his brilliant client acquisition strategy over dinners she'd paid for. Step 3. Lock down the supplier partnerships. The logistics companies, the platform specialists, the web developers. Build the network before Chenwei even knew it existed. Step 4. Stay far, far away from her cousin's wedding reception. The last point made her pause. Part of her, the part that had loved Chenwei, or thought she had, wanted to see him again, to study him with these new eyes, to understand what she'd missed the first time. What red flags had she overlooked in her desperate desire to be loved? But that was weakness talking. That was the old Lin Mei, the one who died alone and broke and betrayed. The new Lin Mei knew better. She typed, Step 4, block cousin's number, claim food poisoning, do not attend wedding under any circumstances. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black under the streetlights. Somewhere in this city, Chenwei was living his life, unaware that the woman he'd destroyed didn't know he existed yet. unaware that she'd already lived through his betrayal and come back to pay it forward. Lin Mei saved her notes and stood up, carrying the bowl of cold noodles to the kitchenette sink. She dumped them out, watching the congealed mass slide down the drain. The sodium smell lingered, but it didn't bother her anymore. She'd eaten instant noodles for years to save money for her dream. This time, she'd eat them to fund her revenge, and this time, she'd eat them with a smile. The fluorescent lights of the municipal business registration office hummed like trapped insects, casting everyone below in a sickly yellow-green glow. Lin Mei sat in a plastic chair that had been orange once, but had faded to the color of old tangerines, her folder of documents balanced on her knees. The air smelled of photocopier toner and the sweet, sharp scent of someone's whiteout pen. 3 weeks had passed since the instant noodles. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, of memories from another life crashing through her consciousness at odd moments. In the shower, on the bus, during lunch breaks at the accounting firm. 3 weeks of planning, researching, and triple-checking every detail. "Number 47, the clerk's voice crackled through the PA system. Lin Mei checked her ticket. 47. She stood, smoothing down her work clothes, the navy blue pantsuit she'd bought on sale 3 years ago. Professional enough to be taken seriously, but inexpensive enough not to hurt her budget. Her shoes clicked against the scuffed linoleum floor as she approached window 6. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with glasses on a beaded chain and a desktop fan aimed directly at her face despite the March chill. She didn't look up as Lin Mei approached. Documents. Lin Mei slid the folder across the counter. Inside, her business registration application for New Path Consulting Services Limited, proof of her registered address, the cramped apartment that she'd included as the business location to save money, her ID card, and the deposit receipt showing she'd placed the required registered capital into a temporary account. The clerk flipped through the papers with practiced efficiency, her pen making small check marks on a form. Consulting services, digital commerce? Yes, helping small and medium manufacturers navigate e-commerce platforms and international logistics. The clerk's pen paused. She looked up for the first time, studying Lin Mei over the rim of her glasses. "You look young for this type of business." In the first timeline, Lin Mei would have wilted under that gaze, would have stammered out apologies and explanations, would have second-guessed herself all the way home. But she'd already lived through failure. She'd already survived the worst. "I'm 27, Lin Mei said evenly, "and I have 4 years of accounting experience working with small manufacturers. I've identified a significant gap in the market." The clerk sniffed but returned to the papers. More check marks, a stamp pressed into red ink, then onto the registration form with a decisive thump. "Processing takes 10 business days. You'll receive a notification when your business license is ready for pickup." "Thank you." Lin Mei gathered her copies of the paperwork, her hands steady. The clerk was already calling the next number before Lin Mei had turned away. Outside, the spring sunshine was watery and thin, but it felt like victory anyway. Lin Mei stood on the steps of the municipal building, breathing in the smell of car exhaust and street vendor food carts, feeling the weight of the paperwork in her hands. In 10 business days, she'd officially be a business owner. Chenwei wouldn't register Digital Bridge Solutions for another 4 months. By then, Lin Mei would already have her first clients. She checked her phone, 3:47 p.m. She'd taken a half day off from the accounting firm, claiming a doctor's appointment. She still had time before the evening tutoring sessions she'd scheduled. Time to start the next phase. Lin Mei pulled out her carefully curated list of potential clients. In the first timeline, these had been Chenwei's first conquests, small factory owners drowning in inventory because they couldn't figure out how to sell online, family businesses watching their profit margins evaporate as e-commerce giants swallowed the market. She'd heard all their stories during those early months with Chenwei when he'd still pretended she was his partner. But when he'd come home and regale her with tales of his business victories? "This factory owner," he'd said, loosening his tie and accepting the tea she'd prepared, "makes the most beautiful silk scarves. Traditional patterns, real craftsmanship. But he's losing money because he only sells to local shops, and the shops are dying. I showed him how to set up on Taobao, helped him photograph his products properly. He almost cried when he got his first online order." Chenwei had painted himself as a savior, and Lin Mei had believed him, had been proud of him, had thought he was doing noble work. Now she knew the truth. that factory owner, Jiang Deming, had paid Chen Wei 50,000 yuan for consultation services that should have cost 20,000 at most. And within 2 years, Chen Wei had convinced Jiang to expand too quickly, taking on debt for inventory that never sold, until the business collapsed and Jiang lost everything. Lin Mei had attended Jiang's funeral in the first timeline. Heart attack at 53, brought on by stress and shame. Not this time. She boarded the subway heading east toward the manufacturing district. The train car smelled of bodies pressed too close together, of someone's lunch of scallion pancakes, of the particular plastic and metal scent of the subway itself. Lin Mei stood holding the overhead rail, swaying with the motion of the train, mentally rehearsing her pitch. She had to be careful. She couldn't know things she shouldn't know, couldn't mention problems Jiang Deming hadn't told anyone about yet, couldn't reference his daughter's name or his wife's health issues, or the fact that his biggest client was about to drop him. She had to seem like she'd done her research, not like she'd lived through the future. The manufacturing district looked the same as it always had. Low concrete buildings with roll-up doors, narrow streets clogged with delivery trucks, the constant background noise of machinery and production. Lin Mei found Jiang Deming's factory squeezed between a plastic molding plant and a packaging company. The sign above the door read, "Deming Silk Products," in characters that had faded to the color of old rust. Inside, the factory floor was a riot of color and motion. Silk in every shade imaginable hung from racks and spilled from boxes. 3 women sat at workstations, their hands flying as they hemmed edges and attached labels. The air smelled like dye and sizing chemicals and the hot metal of the pressing machines. "Can I help you?" A man emerged from a small office at the back, 50-ish, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Jiang Deming. He looked younger than Lin Mei remembered from the funeral, less tired, less defeated. She could save him. "Mr. Jiang, my name is Lin Mei. I'm starting a consulting business focused on helping manufacturers like yourself transition to e-commerce sales. I was hoping you might have a few minutes to discuss your current business challenges." Jiang's expression shifted from polite interest to wariness. "I already told the other consultants. I can't afford—" "No charge for the initial consultation," Lin Mei interrupted smoothly. "I'm building my client base and my reputation. I'd like to offer you a free analysis of your current online presence, or lack thereof, and some suggestions for improvement. If you like what you hear, we can discuss a service contract. If not, you've lost nothing but 30 minutes of your time." She watched him calculate, saw the exact moment his frugality warred with his curiosity, and curiosity won. 30 minutes, he agreed, "but I have to keep an eye on the production line." Of course. He led her to his office, a cramped space barely big enough for a desk, a filing cabinet, and 2 chairs. The walls were covered with photographs of silk scarves in intricate patterns, and sample swatches hung from a corkboard like a rainbow of possibilities. Jiang cleared papers from the visitor's chair, and Lin Mei sat, setting her bag on the floor. "So," Jiang said, settling behind his desk with the air of someone expecting to be disappointed. "What makes you think you can help me?" Lin Mei pulled out her tablet, a device she'd saved for months to buy, older model but functional, and opened her presentation. "Mr. Jiang, how much of your revenue currently comes from online sales?" "None." He said it flatly, without shame. "I sell to 3 local boutiques and 1 department store. That's it. That's all I've ever done." "And how has that been working for you?" His jaw tightened. "Not well. 2 of the boutiques are talking about closing. The department store keeps demanding bigger discounts. My profit margin is almost nothing." Lin Mei nodded, keeping her expression sympathetic but professional. "You're not alone. Traditional retail is dying, especially for specialty goods like yours. But the market for high-quality, handcrafted silk products is enormous. You just need to reach it." She turned the tablet to face him, showing him a comparison chart she'd created. "These are similar products selling on Taobao and JD.com. Look at the price points. Look at the sales volumes." Jiang leaned forward, his eyes widening. "This scarf is going for 400 yuan. Mine are better quality than this." "Exactly. And this shop sold over 10,000 units last year." Lin Mei swiped to the next screen. "Here's another one. A family business in Suzhou making silk scarves very similar to yours. They started selling online 3 years ago. Last year's revenue, 3.2 million yuan." She watched the hunger dawn in Jiang's eyes, the same hunger that Chen Wei had exploited, that had led to Jiang's eventual ruin. But Lin Mei wasn't Chen Wei. She wasn't here to extract everyone she could and leave destruction in her wake. But, she said carefully, transitioning to e-commerce isn't simple. It requires understanding the platforms, managing inventory differently, learning photography and product descriptions, handling shipping logistics, dealing with customer service. Many businesses fail because they jump in without proper planning. Zhang sat back, some of the excitement fading. That sounds expensive and complicated. It can be, or it can be systematic and manageable with the right guidance. Lin Mei pulled up her proposed service package, carefully calculated to be affordable but sustainable. I'm proposing a 3-phase approach. Phase 1, we set up your basic online presence. Store on Taobao, professional product photography, optimized listings. Phase 2, we implement inventory management and shipping logistics. Phase 3, we expand to additional platforms and implement marketing strategies. And this costs 15,000 yuan for the complete 3-phase package, paid in installments as we complete each phase. 5,000 per phase. She'd calculated it carefully, enough to cover her time and expenses with a small profit margin, but significantly less than Chen Wei would charge. Or if you prefer, 2,000 yuan for just phase 1, with no obligation to continue if you're not satisfied. Zhang picked up a pen and began calculating on a notepad. Lin Mei waited, listening to the rhythmic sounds of the factory floor beyond the office door. The silk processing machines had a particular whir and thump pattern that she remembered from the first timeline, or from the day she'd come here with Chen Wei, believing she was his partner, not knowing he'd already cut her out. I can do 2,000 for phase 1, Zhang said finally. If it works, we'll talk about the rest. Lin Mei extended her hand. Deal. His handshake was firm, calloused from years of working with silk. When do we start? I'll have my business license in 10 days. We can start immediately after that. In the meantime, I'll need you to gather some materials for me. High-resolution photos of your products, any brand history or story you want to share, a list of your current inventory with costs and retail prices. They spent the next 20 minutes going over details. Zhang warmed up as they talked, showing her samples, explaining his process, sharing his concerns. Lin Mei took notes, asked questions, and mentally compared everything to what she remembered from the first timeline. When she finally left Deming Silk Products, the sun was starting to set, painting the industrial district in shades of orange and gold. Lin Mei stood on the street outside, breathing in the evening air with its mixture of factory smells and street food from a vendor on the corner. Her first client. The first step in building her own business, her own success. And the first domino in Chen Wei's eventual destruction. She pulled out her phone and crossed Zhang Deming off her list. 7 more potential clients to approach. 7 more chances to build the network that Chen Wei would expect to find waiting for him, only to discover she'd already claimed it. Lin Mei started walking toward the subway station, her steps light despite the long day. Indeed, she had evening tutoring sessions to get to, then hours of work ahead preparing materials for her next client meetings. In the first timeline, she'd have spent this evening cooking dinner for Chen Wei, listening to him talk about his successes, never knowing they were built on the foundation of her stolen dreams. This timeline was so much better. The business license arrived on schedule, a cream-colored document with official red stamps that Lin Mei immediately photographed and saved in 3 different cloud storage locations. She framed the original and hung it on the wall of her apartment, right above the kotatsu table where she'd realized she'd been reborn. Every morning, she looked at it while eating her instant noodles. Every morning, it reminded her why she was doing this. The work was brutal. To 12-hour days at the accounting firm, followed by client meetings in the evenings, then hours of work building websites and creating marketing materials late into the night. On weekends, she photographed products, met with suppliers, and taught herself video editing to create product demonstrations. Within 6 weeks, she had 5 clients. Zhang Deming's silk scarves were selling steadily on Taobao, his first month bringing in more revenue than he usually made in 3. A furniture manufacturer had hired her to manage their entire online transition. A toy company wanted her to help them expand to international platforms. Word was spreading. Small manufacturers talked to each other, and her name was beginning to circulate. So Lin Mei hired her first employee, a recent university graduate named Wang Fang, who was brilliant with social media and desperate for experience. She couldn't afford to pay much, but Wang Fang worked for a small salary plus commission on new clients she brought in. Together, they set up a tiny office in a shared workspace building, Just a desk and 2 chairs in a room they split with a graphic design startup, but it was hers. The accounting firm was starting to notice her exhaustion. Her supervisor pulled her aside one afternoon, concern creasing his forehead. "Lin Mei, you look tired. Is everything all right?" She wanted to laugh. She was running on 4 hours of sleep a night, living on instant noodles and street vendor dumplings, and pushing herself harder than she'd ever pushed before. But she'd never felt more alive. "I'm fine," she said. "Just some personal projects keeping me busy." "Well, don't burn yourself out. You're one of our most reliable accountants." Reliable, steady, forgettable. In the first timeline, she'd stayed at this firm for 8 years, getting small raises and occasional compliments, never quite breaking through to a promotion, never quite being valued the way she deserved. "Thank you," Lin Mei said. "I appreciate that." She gave her 2 weeks' notice the next day. The office gossip was immediate and intense. Lin Mei had been there for 4 years, never caused trouble, never complained. Her leaving was unprecedented. Her coworkers clustered around her desk during lunch breaks, asking questions she deflected with vague answers about pursuing new opportunities and focusing on personal goals. On her last day, they threw her a small party, store-bought cake, and cheap champagne in plastic cups. Her supervisor made a speech about dedication and wished her well. Her coworkers hugged her and promised to stay in touch. Lin Mei smiled and thanked them and meant none of it. She'd never been close to any of them. They'd worked side by side for years without ever really seeing her. She walked out of the office at 5 p.m. on a Friday, carrying a cardboard box with her desk plants and a coffee mug she'd received as a Secret Santa gift. The evening air was warm with the promise of summer, and the city sounds felt different somehow, louder, more vibrant, more alive. She was free. Lin Mei set the cardboard box on a bench at the bus stop and pulled out her phone. Her business now had 12 clients. Wang Feng had brought in 3 more just this week. And they needed to hire another person, maybe 2. They needed more office space. They needed business cards and a proper website and 100 other things. And she needed to stay ahead of Chen Wei. In the first timeline, he'd registered Digital Bridge Solutions in late July. It was now mid-June. She still had time, but not much. Soon he'd make his move. Soon he'd enter the market she was dominating, expecting to find it ripe for the taking. Instead, he'd find every door already closed, every client already claimed, every partnership already forged. Lin Mei picked up her box and boarded the bus when it arrived. Through the window, she watched the city slide past. The office buildings giving way to residential areas, the wealthy neighborhoods with their landscaped parks, transitioning to her cramped district with its street markets and crumbling concrete. She didn't mind the instant noodles or the 4th-floor walk-up or the second-hand furniture. She'd lived through poverty twice now. She knew how to survive it. But Chen Wei had always been comfortable, had always expected success to come easily. When it didn't, when he found himself locked out of the market he thought he'd own, when his business failed before it even truly began, that would destroy him more thoroughly than any lawsuit or public exposure ever could. Lin Mei smiled at her reflection in the bus window. Revenge, she'd discovered, tasted better than sodium-laced instant noodles. Though only slightly. The client meeting was at a tea house in the business district, the kind of place with private rooms and servers in traditional silk qipao dresses who poured Longjing tea from porcelain pots that cost more than Lin Mei's monthly rent. She'd never been to a place like this in the first timeline, had only walked past the frosted glass doors and imagined what happened inside. Now she sat in one of those private rooms, her new business suit pressed and professional, her portfolio on the table beside her teacup, across from a man who represented her biggest opportunity yet. "Ms. Lin," said Zhou Tao, VP of Operations for Huaxing Manufacturing, "your reputation is growing. Several of our smaller suppliers have mentioned your services." Lin Mei inclined her head, accepting the compliment. "I'm glad they've been satisfied with our work." "Satisfied enough that I wanted to meet you personally." Joe lifted his teacup, studying her over the rim. He was in his mid-50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Lin Mei's entire wardrobe, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of business success. Huaxing is considering expanding our direct-to-consumer sales model. We currently sell through distributors and retailers, but we're losing margin at every step. I'm told you can help with that. This was the moment. Lin Mei knew because she'd lived it before. Except in the first timeline, Zhou Tao had been sitting across from Chen Wei, not her. This meeting, this client, this contract had been the foundation of Digital Bridge Solutions' success. Chenwei had landed Huaxing 3 months after starting his business, and the prestige and revenue had propelled him into the top tier of business consultants. Now that opportunity sat across from Lin Mei instead. "I can," she said simply, "but I need to be honest with you, Mr. Zhou. Huaxing is a much larger operation than my current client base. You'd be taking a risk with a relatively new consulting firm." Zhou's eyebrows rose slightly. "Most consultants would be trying to convince me they can handle anything." "You're arguing against yourself?" "I'm arguing for transparency." Lin Mei set down her teacup. "Yes, I can help you develop and implement a direct-to-consumer strategy. I have the knowledge and the team. But you should know that you'd be our largest client by a significant margin. If that makes you uncomfortable, what? I'd rather know now." Zhou studied her for a long moment. "Actually, Miss Lin, that makes me more comfortable, not less. Do you know how many consultants have promised me the moon? How many have oversold their capabilities and underdelivered on results?" He pulled out his phone and opened a document. "I did my research on you. You started New Path Consulting 4 months ago. You have 15 active clients, all small to medium manufacturers. Your client retention rate is 100%. No one has left your service. Your average client sees revenue increases of 40 to 60% within the first 3 months. And every single person I spoke to said the same thing. You underpromise and overdeliver." Lin Mei felt a warm flush of pride, but kept her expression neutral. "I believe in sustainable growth, so both for my clients and my own business." "Which is exactly what Huaxing needs." Zhou set his phone aside. "We don't want someone who'll implement some flashy strategy that looks good for 6 months and then collapses. We want someone who'll build something lasting." They spent the next 2 hours going over details. Zhou explained Huaxing's current distribution model, their product lines, their concerns about brand control and customer relationships. Lin Mei asked questions, took notes, and mentally compared everything to what she remembered from Chenwei's implementation, which had been aggressive and ultimately unsustainable, focused on quick wins rather than long-term stability. "I'd propose a phased rollout," Lin Mei said, pulling up her preliminary strategy on her tablet. "Start with one product line. Your most popular, you with the best margins. Build the infrastructure, work out the kinks, establish your brand presence, then expand systematically. How long? For the full transition, 18 months to 2 years. Zhou frowned. "That seems slow." "It's sustainable," Lin Mei countered. "Mr. Zhou, you could hire someone who promises to have you fully direct-to-consumer in 6 months. They'd rush the implementation, flood the market with products, probably damage your relationships with existing distributors in the process, and very likely create operational chaos that would take years to untangle. Or you can do it properly, maintain your current revenue streams while building new ones, and end up with a stable, profitable business model." "And this comes from experience?" Lin Mei thought of Chenwei, of Digital Bridge Solutions, to know of how his aggressive strategies had burned so bright and collapsed so quickly. "It comes from watching others make expensive mistakes." Zhou laughed, a genuine sound that echoed in the private room. "Fair enough. Send me a detailed proposal. If it's as sensible as this conversation, we'll move forward." They shook hands over the teacups, and Lin Mei left the tea house with her heart pounding and her mind racing. The Huaxing contract would be worth more than all her other clients combined. It would establish New Path Consulting as a serious player in the business consulting space. It would mean hiring more staff, getting a proper office, maybe even sleeping more than 4 hours a night. And it would mean Chenwei's flagship client was already gone before he even opened his doors. Lin Mei stood on the street outside the tea house, letting the summer heat wash over her. Across the street, a woman was yelling at a taxi driver about a fare. 2 businessmen in suits walked past, deep in conversation about quarterly earnings. A street vendor sold candied hawthorn berries on sticks, the fruit glistening red and sticky in the sunlight. The world kept turning. People kept living their lives. And somewhere in this city, Chenwei was going about his day, completely unaware that his entire future had just been stolen. The thought made Lin Mei smile. Her cousin called a week later. Lin Mei was in the new office, a proper office now, with 4 desks and a small meeting room in a better building near the subway station, when her phone buzzed with the incoming call. She'd forgotten to block the number. Or maybe part of her had wanted this moment. "I wanted to hear the voice of the person who'd introduced her to Chenwei in the first timeline." Wei, her cousin chirped when Lin Mei answered. Lin Mei, I haven't heard from you in months. Are you avoiding your family? Just busy with work, Lin Mei said, watching Wang Feng through the glass partition as she presented a marketing strategy to a client. What's up? My wedding, August 15th. Please tell me you haven't forgotten. Lin Mei's hand tightened on the phone. August 15th, the day that, in the first timeline, had changed everything. Oh, right, the wedding. You sound thrilled, her cousin said dryly. Look, I know family events aren't your favorite, but this is important to me, and I need a final headcount for the caterer. Are you coming? Can you bring a +1? I'll come, Lin Mei heard herself say. No +1. Why had she agreed? She should have claimed food poisoning, a business trip, anything. But there was something compelling about facing this moment, about seeing Chen Wei with the knowledge of what he'd become, about watching fate try to push them together and choosing to walk away. Great. I'll send you the details. It's going to be beautiful. We've rented this amazing restaurant with a terrace overlooking the river. Very romantic. I'm sure it will be lovely, Lin Mei said, already planning how to stay far away from any charming men with warm brown eyes. She hung up and stared at her phone for a long moment. August 15th. 3 weeks away. She could do this. She could attend a wedding, avoid Chen Wei, and leave without her life being destroyed. Probably. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of work. The waxing proposal was accepted, and Lin Mei threw herself into the implementation with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done because she'd seen it done wrong before. She hired 3 more employees. She negotiated a better lease on the office space. She worked late into the night and woke up early to answer client emails. And she didn't let herself think about the wedding. Until suddenly, it was August 14th, and she was standing in her apartment holding up 2 dresses. One navy blue and conservative, one red and slightly daring, trying to decide which armor to wear into battle. She chose the navy blue, conservative, professional, forgettable. The wedding was exactly as her cousin had described. Beautiful restaurant, terrace overlooking the river, late summer sunset painting everything in gold and pink. So Lin Mei arrived exactly on time. Not early enough to help with setup, not late enough to make an entrance. She found her assigned seat at a table with other cousins and distant relatives, people she saw once a year at most. The ceremony was sweet. Her cousin looked radiant. The groom seemed nervous but happy. Lin Mei watched them exchange vows and felt a strange disconnect from the proceedings, like she was viewing everything through glass. The reception started with dinner, elaborate courses that kept appearing on the rotating glass centerpiece of the round table. Lin Mei picked at her food, made small talk with her table mates, and scanned the room constantly. She spotted Chen Wei during the 3rd course. He was at a table near the front, laughing at something someone had said, although looking exactly as she remembered, handsome in an accessible way, with those warm brown eyes and that easy smile. He wore a gray suit that fit him well, and even from across the room, Lin Mei could see the charm radiating off him like heat waves. In the first timeline, she'd spilled wine on him during the cocktail hour before dinner. The memory was visceral. The cold splash of red liquid, his startled laugh, her mortified apologies, the way he'd put her at ease, made a joke of it, asked for her number. This time, Lin Mei set down her wine glass and didn't pick it up again all evening. After dinner, people began to mingle, moving between tables, clustering around the bar, stepping out onto the terrace. Lin Mei stayed in her seat, nursing a glass of water, watching Chen Wei work the room. He was good at it, remembered people's names, laughed at their jokes, seemed genuinely interested in their stories. She'd fallen for it so completely. Lin Mei, her cousin appeared beside her, slightly flushed from champagne and happiness. You're sitting here all alone. Come meet some people. I want you to have fun. I'm fine. Nonsense. Her cousin grabbed Lin Mei's hand and pulled her up. There's someone I want you to meet. He's a friend of the groom's, really successful, just started his own business. No, Lin Mei pulled her hand free. I actually need to use the restroom. I'll catch up with you later. She fled before her cousin could protest, weaving through the crowd toward the hallway that led to the restrooms. Her heart was pounding. That had been close, too close. In the restroom, Lin Mei splashed cold water on her face and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked pale, stressed, like someone running from danger rather than attending a wedding. Pull yourself together, she thought. You're not the same person you were. You know what he is. You know what he'll do. That knowledge is power. Use it. She dried her face, reapplied her lipstick, and straightened her shoulders. She could do this. Just a few more hours. Then she could leave and never see Chen Wei again. When she emerged from the restroom, she nearly collided with someone coming around the corner. "Sorry," the man stepped back, steadying himself against the wall. "I wasn't watching, Lin Mei." Warm brown eyes. Easy smile. That voice that had once made her feel seen and understood. Chen Wei. "I'm sorry," Lin Mei said coolly. "Do I know you?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, then amusement. "Apparently not yet." "I'm Chen Wei, friend of the groom. I was just telling your cousin that she has great taste in wine." So he'd already been talking to her cousin, already making connections, building his network. Of course he had. "Lin Mei," she said, not offering her hand. "Cousin of the bride, now if you'll excuse me." "Wait." He moved slightly, not blocking her path, but making it harder to walk away without being rude. "I feel like I should apologize, but I'm not sure for what. Have we met before? Did I do something to offend you?" His confusion seemed genuine. Of course it did. He was good at this. Good at seeming harmless and interested and worthy of trust. "No," Lin Mei said. "We've never met. And you haven't done anything. I just need to get back to my table." "Let me walk with you. I'm heading that direction anyway." This was a test. Lin Mei realized. Fate or the universe or whatever force had sent her back in time wanted to see if she'd make the same mistakes, if she'd let charm and attention cloud her judgment again. That's not necessary. I insist. Besides, it gives me a chance to ask about that beautiful suit you're wearing. Very professional. Let me guess. You work in finance? Corporate law? He was using one of his classic techniques, the flattering observation followed by questions designed to make her talk about herself. In the first timeline, she'd eaten it up, had felt seen for the first time in years. Now it just made her tired. "Consulting," she said shortly, not elaborating. They'd reached the main reception area. Lin Mei could see her cousin watching them from across the room, a delighted smile on her face like she'd successfully played matchmaker. "Wei, consulting," Chen Wei repeated. "Interesting. What kind?" "Business strategy for manufacturers, e-commerce implementation, supply chain optimization, that sort of thing." She watched him carefully, looking for any sign of recognition, any indication that he saw her as competition. But there was nothing, just polite interest and that damned warm smile. "That sounds fascinating," he said. "I'm actually thinking about starting something similar. Well, more focused on digital bridge solutions between traditional businesses and online platforms. I'd love to pick your brain about it sometime. Maybe over coffee." There it was. The hook. The friendly offer that seemed innocent but would lead to coffee, then drinks, then dinners, then late-night conversations where she shared her business plan like an idiot. Lin Mei looked at Chen Wei, really looked at him. In the first timeline, she'd seen what she wanted to see, someone interested in her, someone who valued her mind, someone who wanted to build a future together. Now she saw what was actually there, an ambitious man who saw opportunity in every interaction, who collected people the way others collected business cards. He wasn't evil. That was the thing that made it worse. He wasn't even particularly cruel. He was just casually selfish, the kind of person who'd take what he needed and genuinely not understand why anyone would be upset about it. "I appreciate the offer," Lin Mei said, "but I'm very busy with my own business. I'm sure you understand." Of course. Maybe another time." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. "Here's my information. Oh, just in case you change your mind. Or if you ever need—" "I won't," Lin Mei interrupted. She didn't take the card. "But thank you." She walked away before he could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she could feel his confusion, could imagine him standing there with his business card still extended, trying to figure out what had just happened. Let him wonder. Lin Mei found her table, grabbed her purse, and went straight to her cousin. "Thank you for a beautiful wedding," she said, hugging her cousin quickly. "I'm so sorry, but I need to leave early. Work emergency." "But the cake hasn't even—" "I'm really sorry. Congratulations again. You looked beautiful." She was out the door and in a taxi before her cousin could protest further, before Chen Wei could catch up with her. Before fate could try one more time to push them together. In the taxi, watching the city lights blur past the window, Lin Mei finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking. The relief was so intense it made her dizzy. She'd done it. She'd faced Chen Wei and walked away. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay, miss? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lin Mei laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "Something like that." "Weddings are tough," the driver said sympathetically. "All that pressure to be happy and social. I don't blame you for escaping early." "Yeah," Lin Mei agreed, leaning her head against the cool window glass. Weddings are tough. But she'd survived it. And more than that, she'd proven to herself that she was different now, stronger, smarter, not the woman who'd believed in Chen Wei's lies. By the time the taxi dropped her off at her apartment building, her hands had stopped shaking. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs, unlocked her door, and stood in the center of her small living room, looking at the business license on the wall, at the laptop on the kotatsu table surrounded by client files, at the life she'd built with her own hands. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, Lin Mei. This is Chen Wei from the wedding. Your cousin gave me your number. I wanted to apologize if I came on too strong earlier. I'd really like to talk shop with you sometime. No pressure." Lin Mei stared at the message for a long moment. Then she blocked the number, deleted the text, and set her phone aside. Not this time, Chen Wei. Not ever again. September arrived with cooler temperatures and a deal that made the local business news. New Path Consulting secures major partnership with Huaxing Manufacturing. Read the headline in the industry newsletter that Wang Feng had excitedly pulled up on her tablet during their Monday morning meeting. "We're in the news." Wang Feng waved her tablet around like a flag. "Boss, we're legitimate now." Lin Mei smiled, accepting the tablet to read the full article. It was a small item, just a few paragraphs, but it mentioned her by name and described New Path Consulting as an emerging leader in e-commerce transition strategies. The same newsletter, in the first timeline, had featured Chen Wei and Digital Bridge Solutions. She remembered because he'd framed the article and hung it in his office, and she'd been so proud of him. Now it was her name in print, her company getting recognition, her success. "We were always legitimate," Lin Mei said, handing the tablet back. "But I won't lie, this feels good." The office had grown. They now had 8 employees, including a web developer, 2 project managers, and a client relations specialist. The space had expanded too. They'd taken over the entire floor of the building, with a proper conference room and individual offices, instead of just desks in a shared space. Lin Mei had her own office now, with a door that closed and a window that overlooked the street. She'd hung her business license on the wall behind her desk, along with a few photos of successful client launches. She was wearing better suits these days too, not expensive. She was still cautious with money. He still remembered what it felt like to count every yuan, but professional and well-fitted. Her hair was cut by someone who actually knew what they were doing, instead of the cheap salon near her apartment. She looked like what she was, a successful business owner. The instant noodles were less frequent now. She could afford actual meals, even ate at restaurants sometimes, but she kept a few packets in her desk drawer, a reminder of where she'd started, of what she'd overcome. Her phone rang, the office line, which Wang Feng usually screened, but Wang Feng was in a client meeting, so Lin Mei answered it herself. "New Path Consulting, this is Lin Mei." "Miss Lin, this is Zhang Deming." His voice was warm, excited. "I wanted to thank you personally. We just hit 1 million yuan in online sales." 1 million? I never thought. "Congratulations, mister." "Zheng," Lin Mei said, genuinely pleased. "That's fantastic. It's because of you, your strategies, your guidance. My daughter wants to come work in the business now. She sees a future in it. Before, she wanted nothing to do with the factory. But now," he trailed off, emotion thick in his voice. In the first timeline, Zhang Deming had died before seeing his business succeed, before seeing his daughter's pride in the family legacy. Lin Mei had attended his funeral and watched his daughter weep, knowing that Chen Wei's aggressive strategies had contributed to the stress that killed him. Now Zhang was alive, thriving, excited about the future. "I'm very happy for you, Mr. Zhang," Lin Mei said softly. "I'm telling everyone about you," Zhang continued. "Every business owner I meet? So you're going to be flooded with new clients." "I appreciate that, and I'm glad we could help." After they hung up, Lin Mei sat at her desk for a long moment, staring out the window at the city below. Saving Zhang Deming hadn't been part of her revenge plan. It had just been the right thing to do. A side effect of building her business properly instead of exploiting clients for maximum short-term profit. But it felt good. Better than she'd expected. Her computer pinged with a new email. Lin Mei glanced at it, then froze. The subject line read, Partnership Inquiry, Digital Bridge Solutions. She opened it slowly, her heart rate picking up. Dear Miss Lin, my name is Chen Wei, founder of Digital Bridge Solutions. I've recently entered the business consulting space with a focus on helping traditional manufacturers transition to digital platforms. I've heard excellent things about New Path Consulting and wondered if you might be interested in discussing potential partnership opportunities. I believe there could be significant synergy between our companies, and I'd welcome the chance to speak with you about how we might work together rather than compete. Please let me know if you'd be available for a meeting. Best regards, Chen Wei Lin. May read it 3 times, looking for hidden meanings in every word. He'd started Digital Bridge Solutions, right on schedule, just a month later than in the first timeline. And he was reaching out to her, to talk about partnership. The audacity was almost impressive. She pulled up her browser and searched for Digital Bridge Solutions. The website was basic, clearly new, with stock photos and vague descriptions of services. No client testimonials, no case studies, no actual evidence of work completed. He was starting from scratch, just like she had. Except she'd had 4 months head start, and she'd already claimed every client he'd been counting on. Lin Mei composed her reply carefully. Mr. Chen, thank you for your inquiry. At this time, New Path Consulting is focused on serving our existing client base and is not pursuing partnership opportunities. I wish you success with your new venture. Best, Lin Mei Professional. Courteous, absolutely final. She hit send and felt a small, savage satisfaction. Over the next few months, Lin Mei watched Digital Bridge Solutions struggle. Oh, she didn't seek out the information. It simply came to her. Zhang Deming mentioned that some consultant had cold called him, offering services similar to New Path's but at higher prices. Wang Feng reported that a competitor was trying to poach their clients with aggressive marketing. Industry contacts gossiped about a new firm that was all flash and no substance. Chen Wei was fighting for scraps, and he didn't understand why. In the first timeline, he'd walked into a market full of confused, desperate manufacturers who didn't know how to navigate the digital transition. He'd been able to position himself as an expert, charge premium prices, and build his reputation on their backs. Now, those manufacturers already had a consultant they trusted. They already had systems in place. They already had results they were happy with. Though Chen Wei had nothing to offer them except promises, and promises weren't enough when someone else was already delivering results. Lin Mei heard through the grapevine that he'd landed 2 small clients, a textile manufacturer and a kitchen supply company. Both were struggling businesses that couldn't afford better consultants. Both were exactly the kind of clients that would require enormous effort for minimal profit. She felt no sympathy. Then, in November, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She got sales calls constantly now, but something made her pick up. Lin Mei? Chen Wei's voice. I know you're probably busy, but I was hoping we could talk. Just for a few minutes. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but as I said in my email, I'm not asking for a partnership, he interrupted. I'm asking for advice. So, consultant to consultant. I'll pay your hourly rate. Lin Mei leaned back in her chair. This was unexpected. What kind of advice? I'm struggling. The admission sounded painful. I thought I understood this market, but everything I tried just fails. You've succeeded where I'm failing. I want to understand what I'm doing wrong. There was genuine confusion in his voice. He really didn't understand. In the first timeline, success had come so easily to him because he'd stolen her idea, her client list, her entire strategy. Without that foundation, he was floundering. Part of Lin Mei wanted to hang up, to let him fail without ever knowing why. But another part, the part that had been changed by saving Zhang Deming, by building something real instead of just seeking revenge, was curious. 1 meeting, she said. 2 hours, my office. My standard consulting rate of 2,000 yuan, paid up front. Done. When? They scheduled for the following week. Lin Mei wasn't sure why she'd agreed. Maybe she wanted to see him fail up close. Maybe she wanted to watch him realize he'd lost without ever understanding what the game really was. Or maybe she just wanted closure. Chen Wei arrived at New Path Consulting's office exactly on time, looking around at the busy workspace with undisguised surprise. "This is impressive," he said. "How long have you been in business?" "8 months," Lin Mei replied, leading him to the conference room. "Please sit." He sat across from her, and Lin Mei studied him properly for the first time since the wedding. He looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, and his suit, while still nice, had the slightly rumpled look of someone who'd been wearing it too long. His charm was dimmed, worn down by failure. "I appreciate you meeting with me," Chen Wei said. "I know we didn't exactly hit it off at your cousin's wedding." "Let's stay focused on business," Lin Mei said. "You said you were struggling. Tell me more." He laid it out. The clients who wouldn't take his calls, the proposals that went unanswered, the costs piling up faster than revenue came in. He'd partnered with Lu Xiao. The name made Lin Mei's stomach clench, but she kept her expression neutral. And her family had provided some initial funding, but they were burning through it quickly. "Every manufacturer I approach already has a consultant," Chen Wei said. "And when I ask who, half the time it's you. The other half, they say they've heard about you and are planning to switch to you. It's like you've locked up the entire market." "Not the entire market," Lin Mei said. "Just the reputable segment, the clients who value sustainable growth over quick wins." "How did you do it so fast? You started just a few months before me, but you're everywhere." Lin Mei pulled up her tablet, showing him her client list, anonymized but with industry sectors and contract details visible. "I focused on delivering results, not promises. I charged fair prices based on value delivered, not what I could extract. I built relationships instead of transactions, and I started with a clear understanding of what this market actually needed." Chen Wei studied the screen, his brow furrowing. "But this strategy, it's so similar to what I'd planned. Almost exactly what I'd planned." "Great minds think alike," Lin Mei said blandly. "No, I mean," he shook his head. "I feel like I've had these exact ideas before, but when I try to implement them, nothing works the way I expect it to. Because they were her ideas, stolen in another timeline, and karma had a sense of humor about intellectual property." "Maybe you're not executing well," Lin Mei suggested. "Or maybe you're not as tuned into this market as you thought." Chen Wei looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment Lin Mei wondered if some part of him recognized her from that other timeline, if some quantum echo of their relationship rippled through the space between them. "I feel like I've underestimated you," he said quietly. "Actually, I feel like I've underestimated you my entire life, except we only just met." "So that doesn't make sense." Lin Mei's heart skipped. "That definitely doesn't make sense." "No, it doesn't," he rubbed his face. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. My business is failing. Liu Xiao's family is losing patience. I need to pivot or shut down. What would you do in my position?" The question hung in the air. Lin Mei thought about the answer she could give, the honest, helpful advice that might actually save his business. She thought about the answer she wanted to give, something that would lead him further into failure. And she thought about what she'd learned over these 8 months. That revenge felt good, but building something real felt better. That destroying Chen Wei wouldn't actually heal what he'd broken in that other timeline. "I'd specialize," she finally said. "You're trying to compete with me in my niche, and I've already established dominance there. Find a different angle. Maybe focus on a specific industry sector I haven't penetrated deeply, or offer a different service model, maybe subscription-based long-term support instead of project-based consulting." Chen Wei pulled out a notebook and started writing. "That's actually really helpful. Why are you helping me?" "Because you paid for my time," Lin Mei said, "and because competition makes both of us better." It was true in a way, just not the whole truth. They talked for the full 2 hours. Lin Mei gave him genuine advice. Nothing that would give him an advantage over her, but enough to potentially save his failing business if he was smart about implementing it. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because she'd already won. Maybe because she was tired of carrying hate around like a stone in her chest. Maybe because this Chen Wei, the one who'd never betrayed her, wasn't actually her enemy. Just a stranger who looked like someone she'd once loved. When their time was up, Chen Wei stood and extended his hand. "Thank you. Really, this is more than I expected." Lin Mei shook his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. And she felt nothing, no spark, no recognition, no echo of feelings from another life. "Good luck, Mr. Chen," she said. After he left, Lin Mei sat in the conference room for a long time, watching the city lights come on as evening settled over the streets below. Wang Feng poked her head in eventually. "Boss, you okay?" "Yeah," Lin Mei said. "I'm fine. Just thinking." About? About the difference between winning and succeeding. Wang Feng came in and sat across from her. "Deep thoughts for a Tuesday evening? Did that meeting go okay?" "It went fine. Better than fine, actually." Lin Mei smiled. "I think I just paid forward some good karma." "You're in a weird mood," Wang Feng observed. "Should I be worried?" "No." Lin Mei stood up, gathering her things. "I'm just ready to go home, eat something that isn't instant noodles, and sleep for 8 full hours." "Look at you, living like a real adult," Wang Feng teased. Lin Mei laughed, and it felt genuine, unforced. "Only sometimes. I still keep instant noodles in my desk drawer." "Everyone does. It's a rite of passage." They walked out together, turning off lights and locking up the office. Outside, the November air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of roasting chestnuts from a street vendor on the corner. Lin Mei bought a bag, the warmth seeping through the paper into her hands. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zhou Tao at Huaxing. "Preliminary Q4 numbers are in. Direct-to-consumer revenue up 180%. You're a miracle worker." Not a miracle, Lin Mei thought. Just someone who'd learned from her mistakes. Or rather, from mistakes that hadn't happened yet and now never would. She ate a chestnut, savoring the sweet, nutty flavor, and started walking toward the subway station. The city moved around her, people rushing home from work, vendors calling out specials, taxis honking at pedestrians. All of it familiar, all of it precious, all of it now. In another timeline, Chen Wei had destroyed her. In this one, she'd simply outmaneuvered him, built something better, and moved on. Revenge, she'd discovered, was overrated. Success tasted better, though not quite as good as roasted chestnuts on a cold November evening. Spring returned with cherry blossoms and a milestone Lin Mei had stopped believing she'd reach. New Path Consulting's 1-year anniversary fell on a bright March morning that smelled of rain and possibility. Lin Mei stood in the office, their office, the whole floor now, and looked at the celebration her team had prepared. Streamers hung from the ceiling. A cake sat on the conference table, decorated with the company logo and frosting. Her 8 employees had gathered, chatting and laughing, waiting for her to make a speech. 1 year, 12 months since that night with instant noodles and impossible memories. 12 months since she'd made the choice to build instead of simply destroy. "Speech," Wang Feng called out, and the others joined in, clapping and stomping their feet. Lin Mei raised her hands for quiet. Okay. A year ago, I was working alone out of my apartment with nothing but an idea and a massive amount of denial about how hard this would be." Laughter rippled through the room. "Today, we have 26 clients, a phenomenal team, and a reputation for excellence that I'm incredibly proud of. That's not just my achievement, that's all of ours. Every late night, every solved problem, every satisfied client, that's because each of you believed in what we were building." She looked around at their faces. These people didn't know about the other timeline, about Chen Wei's betrayal, about the revenge that had motivated her those first few months. They knew her as a determined boss who cared about results and treated clients fairly. They knew New Path Consulting as a company that kept its promises. That was enough. That was everything. "Thank you," Lin Mei said simply, "for taking a chance on a new company with an untested leader, for making this work when it shouldn't have worked, for being the best team I could have asked for." Wang Feng cut the cake, and they spent the lunch hour celebrating. Lin Mei fielded phone calls from clients sending congratulations, including a long call from Zhang Deming who'd sent flowers and insisted on thanking her again for changing his life. Later, after everyone had returned to work and the office had settled back into its normal rhythm, Lin Mei sat at her desk with a piece of leftover cake and opened her laptop. She typed Digital Bridge Solutions into the search bar, something she hadn't done in months. The website was gone, replaced by a holding page that said, "Site under renovation." Lin Mei pulled up the business registry database and searched for the company. There it was, Digital Bridge Solutions, registered in July, officially dissolved in February. 6 months of operation before Chen Wei had given up. She should have felt triumphant. This was what she'd wanted, what she'd worked for in those early months when revenge had driven every decision. Instead, she felt Nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no sense of completion. Chen Wei had failed, yes, but his failure didn't define her success. She'd built something real, something valuable, something that existed entirely independent of him and his choices. Then Lin Mei closed the browser and returned to her actual work, reviewing a proposal for a new client, tweaking the numbers to ensure they'd get value while still being profitable for New Path. Real work. Present work. Work that mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi Lin Mei, this is Chen Wei. I wanted to let you know I'm closing Digital Bridge Solutions. Thank you for your advice last year. It helped me realize consulting wasn't the right path for me. I'm going to work for Liu Xiao's family company instead. I think I'm better suited to being an employee than an entrepreneur. I hope your business continues to thrive." Lin Mei stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "Thank you for letting me know. I wish you well in your new role." She hit send and felt something shift in her chest, a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying, finally lifting. In the first timeline, Chen Wei had destroyed her financially and emotionally. In this timeline, he'd simply been a competitor who failed on his own merits. The difference was everything. Lin Mei saved the proposal and stood up, walking to her office window. Below, spring was transforming the city. Trees that had been bare all winter now burst with pink and white blossoms. People walked the streets in lighter jackets, their faces tilted toward the warming sun. The instant noodles in her desk drawer had been there for weeks, untouched. She'd stopped needing the reminder, stopped needing the fuel of remembered poverty and betrayal. She pulled out her phone and called her cousin, the first time they'd spoken since the wedding. "Well, Lin Mei, I was beginning to think you died. You've been so MIA. I know, I'm sorry, work has been crazy, but I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For the wedding, for introducing me to people, for being part of my life even when I'm not great at staying in touch." Her cousin laughed, delighted. "This is weirdly sentimental for you. Are you okay?" "I'm good," Lin Mei said, and meant it. "Actually, I'm better than I've been in years, in a lifetime." "Well, I'm glad to hear it. Hey, speaking of the wedding, remember that guy I tried to set you up with? Chen Wei. He just accepted a job at Liu Xiao's family company. They're dating now, apparently. Seemed like such a nice guy. I thought you two would hit it off." Lin Mei looked out at the city, at the blossoms and the sunlight, and the endless motion of life continuing. "Wrong timing," she said. "These things happen." After they hung up, Lin Mei returned to her desk. She had an afternoon full of meetings, contracts to review, a team to manage. Real work. Important work. Work that was entirely hers. The instant noodles went into the trash on her way out that evening. She didn't need them anymore. 2 years later, Lin Mei stood in a different office, larger, brighter, in a better building in the business district. New Path Consulting had 60 employees now, offices in 3 cities, and a client list that read like a who's who of successful manufacturers. She'd been profiled in business magazines, given talks at industry conferences, been approached by venture capitalists about expansion funding. She'd turned down the funding. She liked maintaining control, liked growing at a sustainable pace. Liked remembering what it felt like to build something from nothing. Her apartment was better now, too. Not penthouse luxury, but a comfortable 2-bedroom with real furniture and a kitchen where she actually cooked. She still ate instant noodles sometimes, when she was working late, but now it was a choice rather than a necessity. The memories from the first timeline had faded somewhat, becoming less visceral, more like a story she'd read than something she'd lived. She rarely thought about Chen Wei anymore. When she did, it was with a kind of distant curiosity, like wondering about a road not traveled. On this particular afternoon, Lin Mei was reviewing candidates for a new senior consultant position when Wang Feng knocked on her door. "Boss, there's someone here to see you? No appointment." "She says it's personal." "Tell her to schedule." "She says her name is Liu Xiao, and it's about Chen Wei." Lin Mei's pen stopped mid-stroke. Liu Xiao, the woman who in the first timeline had been Chen Wei's business partner and eventual affair. The woman he'd left Lin Mei for, though Lin Mei had only learned that fact after everything had already fallen apart. "Send her in," Lin Mei said. The woman who entered was beautiful in a sharp, expensive way. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, the confidence of someone who'd never struggled for anything. She looked around Lin Mei's office with undisguised assessment. "Miss Lin," she said, extending a manicured hand. Thank you for seeing me. Lin Mei shook her hand briefly. Miss Liu, what can I do for you? Liu Xiaoxiao sat without being invited. I'll be direct. Chenwei and I were engaged. Were. Past tense. I broke it off last week when I discovered he'd been using my family connections to build his own network while planning to leave my family's company and start another business venture. Lin Mei kept her expression neutral. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this. Because he was obsessed with you. Liu Xiaoxiao's perfectly painted lips twisted. Talked about you constantly. This brilliant consultant who succeeded where he failed. The one who wouldn't give him the time of day. I finally asked him point blank if he'd been in love with you, and he said, she paused. He said it felt like he'd lost something he'd never had, like there was some version of reality where you two had meant something to each other, but in this one, you were just the competition who won. Lin Mei's heart stuttered. That's strange. Very strange. Strange enough that I started digging into his business plans. Do you know what I found? Liu Xiaoxiao pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Plans for a company called Digital Bridge Solutions 2.0, complete with a detailed strategy that looks suspiciously similar to what he said your company did in its first year. Lin Mei opened the folder. Inside were business plans, financial projections, even a list of potential clients to target. It was eerily familiar, a ghost of the first timeline trying to reassert itself. He was going to steal your model, Liu Xiaoxiao said. Again. Or for the first time, I don't know, the whole thing felt wrong. Like he was copying something he'd seen before but couldn't quite remember. Why are you showing me this? Because I don't like being used. And because I thought you should know that you were right not to trust him. Liu Xiaoxiao stood. I'm heading back to Shanghai. I wanted to deliver this in person and warn you. Chenwei is angry about his failures, and angry men do stupid things. After she left, Lin Mei sat with the folder for a long time. The plans inside were detailed, professional, and almost certainly doomed to fail. Chenwei still didn't understand why New Path succeeded, still thought it was about strategy rather than execution and integrity. But more than that, his comment to Liu Xiaoxiao bothered her. Like there was some version of reality where they'd meant something to each other. Maybe on some quantum level the timelines bled through. Maybe some part of Chenwei remembered what he'd done to her in a world that no longer existed. Maybe that was its own kind of justice, being haunted by crimes you technically never committed. Lin Mei filed the folder away in a drawer and returned to her work. If Chenwei wanted to start a new competing business, let him. She'd beaten him once. She could do it again. But she hoped she wouldn't have to. She hoped he'd learned, grown, become someone different. She hoped, but she didn't count on it. The rooftop restaurant overlooked the city from 20 floors up, all glass and steel and views that cost more per table than Lin Mei used to make in a month. She sat at a corner table, waiting, watching the sunset paint the buildings in shades of amber and rose. Zheng Deming's daughter, Zheng Mei now running Deming Silk Products after her father's retirement, slid into the seat across from her. Sorry I'm late. A production issue at the new factory. New factory? Lin Mei smiled. Congratulations. Thanks to you, our online sales hit 10 million this year. Dad never dreamed. She stopped, emotion thick in her voice. You saved his life, you know. Literally. The doctor said the stress would have killed him if things hadn't turned around when they did. Lin Mei thought of Zhang Deming's funeral in the first timeline, of his daughter's tears. I'm glad I could help. They ordered dinner, real food, expensive food, the kind of meal Lin Mei had only dreamed about during those instant noodle years. As they ate, they caught up on business and life, two women who'd both built something meaningful from scratch. I heard a rumor, Zhang Mei said over dessert. Chenwei is starting another consulting business. Lin Mei nodded. She'd heard the same. Digital Bridge Solutions 2.0 had officially registered last month. Let him. You're not worried? No. And Lin Mei realized it was true. I was worried the first time back when I was just starting out, but I've built something real now, something that doesn't depend on being first or being the only option. It depends on being good, on being trustworthy, on actually delivering what I promise. That's very zen of you, Zhang Mei teased. That's very exhausted by rivalry of me, Lin Mei corrected. I spent too much energy on competition early on. Now I'd rather focus on creation. After dinner, they parted ways. Zhang Mei to her car, Lin Mei to walk for a while. The spring evening was perfect, warm enough to be comfortable, cool enough to be refreshing. Lin Mei wandered through the business district. Past the office buildings and restaurants, past the street vendors and late-night shoppers. She found herself, almost without meaning to, back in her old neighborhood. The fourth-floor walk-up was still there, looking exactly as shabby as she remembered. The street market had changed. New vendors, different products, but the essential character remained the same. Lin Mei stood outside the building, looking up at the window that used to be hers. Someone else lived there now? Someone else struggling to make rent? Someone else eating instant noodles and dreaming of better days. She hoped they'd get their chance. Everyone deserved a second chance, even if they didn't get to remember the first one. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the company's social media account. 100,000 followers. Another milestone, another marker of success. Lin Mei smiled and put her phone away. Numbers were nice. Recognition was nice. But what really mattered was the work itself. The clients she'd helped, the employees she'd mentored, the life she'd built with her own hands. She started walking again, leaving the old neighborhood behind. Not running from it, not ashamed of it, just moving forward, the way life was meant to move. The city lights came on as darkness fell, thousands of them, millions of them, each one representing a person, a story, a choice made and remade every day. Lin Mei was one light among many, burning steady and bright, fueled by hard work and second chances and the knowledge that revenge, in the end, mattered less than simply living well. Somewhere in this city, Chen Wei was making his plans, building his business, trying again. She hoped he succeeded this time. She hoped he learned to do it honestly. But either way, it wasn't her concern. Her life was her own now, fully and completely. The past, both versions of it, had released its grip. Lin Mei flagged down a taxi and gave her address. The nice apartment, the one she'd earned, the one that came with success she'd built herself. The driver pulled into traffic, and the city slid past the windows in a blur of light and motion and endless possibility. Life, Lin Mei thought, tasted nothing like instant noodles. It tasted like spring air and expensive desserts and satisfaction earned the hard way. It tasted like second chances and choices made right the second time around. It tasted like waking up each morning knowing that what you built was real and yours and worth every sleepless night and every sacrifice. The taxi turned a corner, and the old neighborhood disappeared from view. Lin Mei didn't look back.